Okay, hello and welcome everyone. We're going to go ahead and get started with today's webinar. Today we're going to be talking about donation statements. And this is version 21.18.2. And this is going to be, if you're following along in our workbooks, it's donations 106 and it's pages 2 through 17. And those workbooks, if you're not sure what I'm talking about, they're available for purchase on our website. You don't need them to follow along today, but if you have them and you're looking for where we're going to be in, donations 106, pages 2 through 17, donation statements. And we've got a lot to get through, so I'm going to dive right in. We're going to open up the donations module, and we've got a donation statement button right down here in the bottom corner. Now, before we go there, I just want to show you real quick, in Manage Givers, there's a very important checkbox that we need to be checked for people to be able to receive a statement, and that's this Receive Statement checkbox right here. If that is unchecked for anybody, they will automatically be excluded and will not receive a statement. So that's very important. If you're missing folks, go ahead and check and see if they've got that box checked. It might have gotten unchecked by mistake because it is right there when you first open Manage Givers. But it should be checked for everyone, especially if you are missing somebody. You want to make sure that that is checked. All right. So once we know that everybody who needs to get a statement has that checked, we can go into donation statement. And we have some options right off the bat. So the first thing that we have is the giving section, giving include. We can choose all if we want everyone regardless of their giving. And we can choose only those who gave. Now this is selected by default, and that's the typical choice that's used because typically you just want to print statements for people who did give, not for people who didn't give. This checkbox right here next to only those who gave is if you only want people who gave a single gift of $250 or more. So what that means is people who didn't have a total of $250 but had at least one single gift of $250 or more. So that's if you're looking for like big number donors. And then we can choose only those with giving from, and we could enter a range. Maybe we only want people who gave between, and this part is totals, not single gifts. So this we could do people who gave at least $50 maybe. And you can choose no upper limit so that we're doing at least $50, or you can uncheck no upper limit and do a range. So maybe we only want people who gave between a certain range of total amount. But typically that one's going to be used for just a minimum. Maybe you don't feel it's necessary to send statements to folks under a certain amount. That is an option for you. And then the final option would be only those who did not give, if you wanted to print out statements just for folks who had no giving, to show them that they had no giving. Now keep in mind that's going to grab everybody unless we add some additional search criteria. So I'm going to leave it on only those who gave. Then we have this drop-down box where it says and. And the and allows us to say that the person has to meet this top criteria and this bottom criteria. We could also change it to or, and then we would be saying they meet either this criteria or this criteria, not necessarily both. We're going to leave that as and. And then in the pledging section, we have the same choices as the giving section, but this applies to pledging. So if you're not a pledging church, don't worry about this. Just always keep it on all. But if you are a pledging church, you can use these options as well. Maybe you want to see only those who pledged and combine it with only those who didn't give. So that would be people who said they were going to give a certain amount but didn't end up giving anything. That's one example. So that's how you can combine the two sections in various ways. Again, we have only those with pledging from a certain amount. And again, you can do no upper limit or you can do a range amount. And then only those who did not pledge. We could also limit it to only certain frequencies of pledges, flat, annual, etc. Or we could say only those who have met all their pledges or who have not met all their pledges. I'm going to leave it on all. Then up here in the top right, we have gives with family include. Now, the majority of the time, we're going to leave that as all, but you could also choose to only print statements for folks who give as a family. That's couples or families who give together and get one combined statement and share a giving number if you use giving numbers. Or you could do only those who do not give with family, but we're going to leave it as all. Then below that, we have our date range. It defaults to the current year, January to December, or if you're on a fiscal year, it would have your fiscal calendar dates as opposed to January to December. It would be, June to July, or June to May, rather. So it depends on how you've got that set up. You can print statements for a wider year range than just a single year if you wanted to. We're going to go ahead and leave it as the current year. You could also use the year minus to go backwards if you wanted to print a statement for the past. And then year plus takes you back forward. Next we have the Givers tab. And this is the main screen that comes up when you're doing membership reports. So this is just like the People tab in membership reports. Perhaps we want to print statements only for folks who have a certain status code. Whoops, it would help if I could type. Status code. So in that case, we could say only statements for active or associate members and press Add Selection. Or we could do not child or visitor and then uncheck those ones. So you have all kinds of different options that you can combine using different membership criteria. If I click Add Selection, then it pops it down there. I'm going to click Clear because we don't actually want to do that right now. And then up in the top right here, we could select to only print statements for those with giver number or only those without giver numbers. So you can toggle between those two choices or leave them both checked. You could also only print a certain range. Maybe you only want to print statements for the givers with numbers between 1 and 150. And you could uncheck include those without number, and then you'd only get those statements. Again, I'm going to clear these back to the defaults. And then this named range is something that you can set up. For example, we've got 200 through 250 assigned as children's envelopes. So I could choose to print only statements for those named range, the children's envelopes, envelopes between 200 and 250. But I'm going to clear that out for now. We also have the option to print only a certain category. We could uncheck visitors if we only want member statements. And then we have a few more options down here at the bottom in the include box. Inactive is always going to be checked by default for statements because if someone passes away at the church or they leave, mid-year and you inactivate them, you would still want to print a statement for them to be able to show what they gave during the year before they were inactivated. So that's checked by default, but you could uncheck it if you wanted. Then we have membership groups. Now that's referring to the groups and classes that you set up in membership, like your committees or your Sunday school groups. So typically we don't need to print those. Then we have the two types of donations givers, donations individuals and donations group givers. If you have folks in your database who are set up as donations individual givers or donations group givers that you want statements for, you should definitely make sure both those boxes are checked. So I'm going to go ahead and keep those checked, leave membership groups unchecked. Then on the Accounts tab, we could choose to print statements only for certain accounts. We have this whole long list of different accounts that people can give to, and maybe we're not concerned with people who gave to some of these memorial or some of these outreach type accounts. Maybe we only want people who gave to the general fund and only the general fund information on our statements. We could double click that to move it to the right side on the selected accounts, and then that would be all that would print. I want to go ahead and print for everything though, so I'm going to double click and clear it out and move it back. Up at the top, we also have our campaigns, our pledging campaigns. So if we only wanted to print for this year's 2018 stewardship campaign, for example, we could choose that, and then that's all we would get on our statements. I'm going to clear that out again, and then go to the Sort tab. Here we can choose to sort the statements in 3 different ways. We can either have them print in giver number order, giver name order, or zip code order. I'm going to go ahead and leave it on name. And I'm going to click Next, and then we'll be in step 2. So here in step 2, we have the list of all the names of the people who met our search criteria from step 1. And we have quite a few options in the top section here. First and foremost is the statement layout. We have several statement layouts that come with the program, but most folks use the windowed envelope. If you want to know what the different statement layouts look like, just choose one and click Print Email Statements, and you'll get to see a preview. Below that, we have the global memo. And you can see we've got a few different global memos in here from the past. And if you want to create a new one, you press this little button that looks like a piece of paper with writing on it. And when you hover over it, you'll see it says Add, Edit, and Delete Global Memos. So if I click that, it brings up a new window where I could enter in a new statement end of year memo for this year, or I could edit the current one. This one, I'll just go ahead and edit by changing the dates to 2018. And then that way I can use that same statement without having to create a new one or retype it out. Next, we have a few little choices. We can choose to warn if the statement spans more than one page. So if somebody has a lot of donations and it's going to print on more than one page and I want to know that in advance, I can click that box and it'll allow me to be informed when I click print if somebody's statements is going to split onto multiple pages. If you are not a pledging church, like I mentioned before, you can uncheck this box and it will hide any of the pledging columns and information on your statements so that it doesn't confuse folks since you don't use that. So you could check that if you're not a pledging church. And then we have a choice, do not show separate tax deductibility sections. That's referring to the fact that you can mark your accounts as tax deductible or not. Some churches maybe take payments for certain things in addition to donations, and those payments would not be tax deductible. So by default, the statement is going to lump your giving into those two separate sections, tax deductible and not tax deductible. If you don't want it to do that, you can check this box. I'm going to leave it unchecked though. The Statement Designer button here allows you to customize your statement layout template. We're not going to go into that because it's a big involved process and it's covered in other webinars. Next, we have the account summary sort, and this is the order of the accounts on the statement only. So if you want to modify the order that the accounts appear in, you can come to this Order Account Summary section, and you can manually change the order using the up and down arrows to move the highlighted account up or down the list. And then you have buttons to sort by name or sort by number. And then you click OK to finalize that setting. I'm going to go ahead and say sort by number because my numbering system in my particular database gets it in the order that I'd like. Then we have print labels up here in the top corner if you want to print mailing labels for this exact list of folks. I'm not going to show you that, but it is there if you need to print labels to send out these statements. Then we have the statement date ranges. If we click Change Dates, we can see the three different sections of the statement: detail, summary, and quarterly. And we can toggle between some different options here. Maybe I want the detail and the summary to be the whole year, but I only want the quarterly to show the last quarter. I could uncheck all the other quarters and just have Q4 print in the quarterly section. I'm going to leave everything checked though to show you and leave the whole year set. But if we wanted to, we could limit one or all of these sections so that we can really truly customize this statement. The Organization Info tab allows us to choose how the church's information is displayed. You can add multiple sets of organization information. Maybe you want a separate set of information for your Sunday school classes or something like that. That's what the organization information is. It's the name of your church, and if I click the plus sign, you can see its name, address, and basically all the contact information for the church. The Email tab is where you're going to make all of your settings for emailing statements, which is also covered in another webinar. So I'm not going to talk about this tab. I'm just pointing out it exists. You can see here all of my people are set to print and not to email. I can also tell it to check print if there is no email address, if I was going to print some and email some. And down at the bottom you have check print for all, uncheck print for all, check email for all, uncheck email for all. So each of these buttons toggles where the check marks are. I want to check print for all. And the final tab we need to look at is relabel fields. This allows you to change the way that the different sections are indicated on the statements. Sometimes folks prefer for it to say the current year instead of pledged, or maybe they want to spell out frequency all the way instead of just having it say FREQ. So all of that is available as well. Over under, you might want to say like the difference between pledged and giving or something like that. And then our final option on the Relabel Fields tab is to have the account summary section say the campaign name instead of the account name. And this is referring to pledging as well. And I'll show you how that changes it in just a minute. But for now, I'm going to leave it unchecked, and that means it's going to print the account name, not the campaign name. So all of that is how we customize what the statement looks like, and let's go ahead and finally click print and take a look at that statement. So this is our statement. Those multiple sections it was talking about refer to the detail here, and then the summary, and then the quarterly is the last. I'm going to erase that. And you can see that last option I mentioned about the campaign versus the account right here. We have general fund with the 2018 dates. If I close my print preview and check this box and then click print, instead it will say Stewardship 2018, which is the name of my campaign, my pledge campaign for this year. So I know that was super, super fast, but that is how you run statements. If you have questions, type them into the questions panel. I'm going to come back and answer the ones that came in while I was talking. If you have specific questions about some of these customizations for your specific data, you can give us a call and we can walk you through that. But if you have general questions, go ahead and get those typed in. And that concludes today's webinar. I will stick around to answer any questions that come through, but if you don't have any questions, you can go ahead and sign out. Thank you for joining us. Bruce asked where you set up the tax deductibility. It is in the account setup screen in donations. That's the giving account setup screen. Kathy asked if there's a way to see who has received statement checked. There is a way to do that. You would go through reports to do that. Probably through membership would be easiest. We can walk you through that if you give us a call, Kathy, or anybody else who wants to know how to print the list of people set to receive a statement. We can definitely do that. Linda asked if you can only print statements for folks who request them. Absolutely. If you want to print just one statement, the easiest thing to do is on that first screen, you can just skip over all of this and click Next. Then when we have our whole list of people in step 2, we can do uncheck print for all. And then I can just scroll through and put check marks next to the folks who asked me for a statement. So maybe only Penny and Victoria asked me for statements. I can uncheck everybody else, just check Penny and Victoria, and click print. Marion, yes, this is what you send out for taxes at the end of the year for your folks to know what they need to deduct from their taxes. And I forgot to mention at the beginning, but if you are one of our Canadian users and you have your setup set to Canada settings, it'll say donation receipt instead of statements because we know the terminology is different there as well. Andrea asked if we can print summary only. Absolutely. That is in the statement designer. I'll take a brief peek in here with you guys that are sticking around. Up here across the top, we have checkboxes for showing each of the 3 sections. Show account summary, show detail, and show quarterly. So if I uncheck quarterly and detail, and I click Save As, and I call this, whenever we're saving over something that already exists, we have to rename it so we don't replace the original one. So I'm going to call this custom windowed envelope. And then I'm going to exit out. And you can see here in my date range box, it changed for detail and quarters to not visible because I hid them. Any other questions? Liza asked if the churches are the ones deciding whether a donation is tax deductible. In general, the way that you know if a donation is tax deductible or not is whether or not the person receives something in exchange for the donation. If you know, if they're giving you a donation and they're getting something in return, then it's probably not a donation that's tax deductible. It's probably a payment for something. By and large, if the person is just giving a donation without getting anything back, then that is tax deductible. Okay, any final questions? I'll stick around another minute or two. If you're typing in a question, go ahead and hit enter so I know that you're typing and so I don't shut you down. Otherwise, if you don't have any questions, thanks again for joining us and have a great rest of your day. Okay, I'm not seeing any other questions come in, so I'm going to close the room. If you are typing in a question, hit enter real quick so I know you're typing it. And thank you one last time. All right, bye.